three things, three very clear indicators. One is your ability to maintain relationships, to form and maintain healthy, happy relationships. The second factor is self-awareness. Are they aware of their strengths and limitations? And the third thing is the ability to embrace change and go with change.
In terms of the profile of a leader, we traded very heavily on IQ, intelligence. And I think the profile of the successful leader now is much broader than that. So big emphasis on emotional intelligence, certainly spiritual intelligence, and then the physiology of the person. I think all of those come into play.
Hello, my name is Guy Clapperton, and with me are Professor Adrian Furnham from the University College London, a psychologist, and David Woodward, who is a former Chief Executive of Heinz North America. Gentlemen, welcome. I'd like to talk about the six traits that have been identified that make a good leader. Can you tell me a little bit, for example, about your view on conscientiousness?
Very often people don't see that they have a lack of conscientiousness that could be their derailer. They don't see this lack of organisation. And if I think to some of the more challenging times that I've experienced when I've been looking after Africa and the Middle East, and I've been buying a business in South America, and I've been managing a house purchase over in the UK and managing family arrangements and planning for the next year's AOP, annual operating plan, and presenting to the board, you have to be organised. And sure, you have a great team around you to help you do that, but ultimately you're the person that's providing the direction. So I think it's absolutely right up there in terms of one of the traits that we should all be looking for. Not always that obvious, actually, until you really do test for it and deep dive.
Thank you. Let's talk about adjustment. That's another one of the criteria. First of all, Adrian, having written the criteria, how do you mean adjustment?
Well, it's about resilience, is another word for it. The high adjusted person tends to be less prone to anxiety and depression, and when they do get, which is quite normal, stress, they cope with it well. It's tough at the top. Every leader will tell you that, and you need to have ways of dealing with that stress.
I think with adjustment, I think the most successful leaders, the people that I've had the good fortune to work with and learn from, are those that almost thrive on it. They thrive on the uncertainty, they thrive on the challenges that get thrown at them, and frankly, when things become a little bit too comfortable and too normal, they are not at their best. So Adrian's quite right, you do see people kind of going, I think, one of two ways. They either thrive because they know how to manage it and they know actually it's one of their stimuli, or they really struggle with it.
I'm going to ask Adrian again first because I like the academic view. Are people born curious, or do they get curious woken up in them? Can education stifle curiosity? How do you measure curiosity? Where does it come from?
I think curiosity cannot be learnt. I think it's something you have inside you. You can see it. For some people, they're just not very curious. They're not interested in how things work, what the future's going to be like. I don't think you can put it in people. You can stimulate it in certain areas. People do get curious about some things more than others, but it's something to look for. It is the clue to their intelligence, it's a clue to their liveliness, it's a clue to their longevity, in fact.
When people are in very intense jobs, they kind of lose that natural creativity. And I often say to people, each and every day, try and do something you wouldn't normally do. Pick a different magazine up, Basket Weaving Monthly. Take a different trip to work. Put a different radio channel on. We don't do enough to stimulate that curiosity in ourselves. So I think it is something that we're born with to an extent, and some have a much greater propensity, but we can stimulate it. And as leaders, we should be encouraging that.
I'd like to talk now about risk approach. Again, this is something that I think can change over a period of time, over at different times of your life. Same question as before, really. Are people born with a given risk approach?
The question is how uncomfortable you are with risk. Personal risk. If you look at entrepreneurs as a very good example, every single one of them has failed. They've failed, they've fallen down, they've dusted themselves off, they've learnt their lesson. They haven't stopped being risky, they remain risky, but they know how to manage that risk, and they know about probabilities. So again, it's risk averse, bad, highly risky, bad, in between, well thought through, calculated risks. That's the secret.
The great leaders for me are the ones that take a little bit more of the difficult stuff on their own shoulders than perhaps they should, and a little bit less of the kudos than perhaps they should. And that's quite a risky approach, because as leaders we're kind of conditioned to self-publicise and talk about how effective we are and the results we've got. But I think the most effective leaders are those that take that risk and feed a lot of that down, because people recognise at the end of the day, it's the leader that has provided the environment and provided the oxygen, the scope for people to do a great job.
Let's talk about ambiguity acceptance. So what does that actually mean for a start?
It's called tolerance of ambiguity, uncertainty avoidance. It means discomfort with lack of clarity. And I think it's that ability, the ability to be comfortable around ambiguity, because the world is an ambiguous place.
Acceptance of ambiguity is very important, but as a leader it's also sometimes critical that you're able to kind of filter that and distill it to give some greater clarity to help people through some of those more difficult situations.
Now the final trait is of course competitiveness.
For me, competitiveness and results orientation is what it's all about. You know, your reputation does rely very much on your ability to deliver results, and that comes from your intrinsic competitiveness. One of the things that I do note is that sometimes people don't quite know where the competition is. So within companies, you find the competition is some people actually compete with each other. I think that's a very dangerous trait. So as you're developing and encouraging that, you need to make sure that people are focusing on the competition, which tends to be outside, and tends to be the people who may move faster than you with new innovations to the marketplace. They may move faster with you with talent acquisition and talent development or any of those things. So competitiveness is absolutely at the forefront of success in business in my experience.
Is there any external research that demonstrates that people need competitiveness tempered with other things?
Competitiveness is a very masculine word. It's a very sort of strong word. It seems to be the opposite of cooperativeness. You know, competitive people fight against each other, whereas cooperative people help each other. The idea comes from a literature, an old literature now, on three basic motives. A man called McClellan many years ago, he talked about need for achievement, need for affiliation, and need for power. And this need for achievement is really what competitive is all about. It's about winning. It's about getting to the best. You know, school children would do the Duke of Edinburgh's award. It is an achievement. It is, you've done something and you've done it well. You want people to be competitive, you want them to win, you want them to be successful, you want them to achieve, but you don't want to do it wildly at all costs, breaking the law, to the cost of your health. That is not good. But to be desirous of achievement, to want to become number one, to be among the winning team, those are the things which drive people, and it drives them for all time. People want to know about motivation. This is the one that is the most powerful of the 6 traits, the indicators of motivation. Need for achievement, competitiveness, yearning to be successful.
I think there's another key dimension, which is very competitive people. Occasionally you don't make it, all right? You haven't won that particular event.
Yes.
You haven't delivered that particular quarter. So how do you then respond? How do you approach the event the second time round? How resilient are you? How much time do you take to reflect and really take the learnings on board? And sometimes that can be really bruising, and encourage people to be very open and honest with you about how, and then help them as a team see reality and help them understand why we haven't achieved it. So the really great leaders for me are the ones that are able to bounce back, not from consecutive failure after failure. That probably means they are in the wrong job. But I think as a leader and leadership groups, we should accept that sometimes people will fail because they've pushed the boundaries and they may have tried incredibly hard. It's how they then deal with it the next time round and make sure they are successful subsequently. But generally speaking, all the great sportsmen, when they fail or when they taste failure, you can see it on their body language, in their face, in their voices. Lewis Hamilton is a great example, incredibly successful. But when he has a bad race or a bad event, you can read it all over him. And you can actually look down into a cockpit when he's driving and you can see the style he's driving in because he's so frustrated with what's just happened.
Because he set himself a standard against which he's failed. And it'll be a motivator, not a, you know, you are made or broken by adversity. And it's that early experience sometimes that, if you look into the biography of people, gives you a very good indicator. David said right at the beginning, look backwards, look at their history of relationships, look at the way they've made decisions in the past, look at the way they've formed relationships. That is the indicator, I think, of whether they're going to thrive and survive.